What up, cucks? It's your boy, the hater. And I figured since we've been reviewing a lot of garbage recently, why not review something that was awesome? I'm talking about WrestleMania 15. If people like this video, then maybe I'll review a bunch of other older pay per views, maybe from the Attitude Era. Maybe I'll do a WrestleMania review here and there, but I don't think I'm going to go and watch like WrestleMania 1. You know what I'm saying? Nobody got time for that. Now, WrestleMania 15 is a controversial one. A lot of people didn't like it. I personally really enjoyed it because I started watching wrestling, I would say, the summer after this WrestleMania. So, like 5, 6 months after this, maybe, right? I started watching wrestling. I would say, like, around SummerSlam of that year is when I really started watching wrestling, here and there, right? The first pay per view I ordered was Royal Rumble, the one after this one. So this is a pay per view event that I actually ended up watching, afterwards. Like I rented it at Blockbuster, you know what I'm saying? And that's why it holds a special place in my heart because it kind of really connected the dots of where things were the year before when I became a fan, basically. Right now, let's get started with the match. It was pretty great. First up, I should note that there was a battle royal on Sunday Night Heat to determine the number one contenders for the WWF Tag Team Championships, right? And that was won by D'Lo Brown and Test. The battle royal was such that basically it was every man for himself, and the last two guys are going to form like a random tag team and perform later that night at WrestleMania. So the first match starts, right? We start off with what I thought was a great match personally for the WWF Hardcore Championship. First up, Hardcore Holly comes out looking like a monster, right? He's just huge. He's jacked. He's in his prime for sure. It's just crazy, like, how this guy was a mid-carder. And, like, if he was in WWE right now, like, he'd be beating the shit out of people like Drew McIntyre and, like, fucking, like Ricochet and things like that. It wouldn't even be close. Like, he would look like a real star. And then speaking of real stars, the badass Billy Gunn comes out also looking like a monster, right? Now, these two guys by themselves, in my opinion, already make this match worth it. But next up, Al Snow comes out. And Al Snow, even though he's smaller than the other guys, he's bigger than, let's say, like a Cody Rhodes or a Seth Rollins, right? Like, so we have three guys who are huge. They look like wrestlers. They feel like wrestlers beating the hell out of each other. This is a short match, around 5 to 10 minutes maybe, like somewhere between there. I really enjoyed it. Billy Gunn is great. He hits the famouser. Hardcore Holly ends up winning, right? Great opening match for a meaningless title with three essentially lower card guys. But it goes to show that even the lower card guys at this time were amazing, right? They just look like wrestlers. The bare minimum for a jobber was like higher than it is to be world champion now, right? Like someone like Kofi Kingston or Xavier Wood. Like, when people say like this guy would never make it in the Attitude Era? This is why, because it's like you would have no spot for Xavier Woods in a match like this because it's like, it's just not believable. Like to put Xavier Woods next to like Hardcore Holly, it's just laughable, right? Like Hardcore Holly would completely brutalize him in 3 seconds if he so chose to do, right? Next up, we had a pretty decent but short match. It was Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett with Deborah, one of the best entrance musics of all time, like the Deborah entrance music, the down, 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 the Jeff Jarrett one. Great music, right? They were defending their titles against the aforementioned team of D'Lo Brown and Test, right? Nothing really crazy here. The whole story of the match, even though it was like a 3-minute match, right? The story of the match was D'Lo Brown and Test are in the tag team. Owen and Jeff Jarrett are. Owen and Jeff Jarrett win with this like roll-up missile dropkick combination. Nothing crazy, but it was fun. Then we had the payoff for the Brawl for All. For those of you that don't know, the Brawl for All was a legit boxing tournament, essentially. It was a tough man tournament, and it was supposed to be won by Dr. Death Steve Williams, and he was supposed to get a huge push. But he didn't win. Bart Gunn won. Bart Gunn was a legit boxer. He was a Golden Gloves champion, but now he had to fight Butterbean in a boxing match. For those of you that don't know who Butterbean is, you really are missing out. One of my personal favorite athletes of all time. I'm sure if you Google Butterbean, you're going to see him and you're going to know exactly who I'm talking about, right? Butterbean knocks out Bart Gunn in 35 seconds, basically proving that there are levels to this, right? This is what I'm talking about when you hear people like, well, Max Holloway would beat every boxer alive. Butterbean would eat everyone in the UFC in his prime. It wouldn't even be close. He would just butcher them all, just like he butchered Bart Gunn, who is a large motherfucker. Butterbean wins by knockout brutally, right? He knocks him down once. Bart Gunn gets up, shows a lot of heart, gets knocked the fuck out. It is what it is, right? Next up, we had a great mid-card match, right? With a purpose. Mankind versus the Big Show. Big Show wins by DQ, right? He basically chokeslams Mankind. I think it was a chokeslam. He slams Mankind. I think it was a chokeslam, but it could have been something else, onto a chair. That's enough. He gets DQ'd. Now, the problem is the winner of this match was going to be the special guest referee for the main event, right? So Big Show was aligned with Vince McMahon. Vince was aligned with The Rock. So Vince wanted Big Show to win. Big Show loses by disqualification. So Mankind is going to be the special guest referee. Vince comes out and basically gets in Big Show's face. Big Show lifts him up with a choke slam and then puts him down because he kind of has second thoughts. Vince keeps yelling at him, slaps him. Big Show knocks him out, right? Now, to be fair, McMahon no-sold this because afterwards he was like, I'm going to be the special guest referee. But let's get to that, right? Now, at this point, I think we've pretty much skipped the bottom portion of the card, and now we're getting to the real mid-card, right? So, the real mid-card was a four-way elimination match for the Intercontinental title. The implicit story here was that Ryan Shamrock, who was supposed to be Ken Shamrock's sister, was basically a slut, and she had been with all these guys except for Road Dogg, right? Road Dogg was the champion, and he beats Goldust, Shamrock, and Val Venus. But everyone looks strong. Everyone looks big except for Road Dogg. Shamrock goes crazy, suplexes everybody. Eventually, Road Dogg hits the pump handle and pins, I think it was Goldust who was pinned last, right? Good match, a good mid-card match. It made the Intercontinental title feel special because you had four great wrestlers, even Goldust, wrestling for it. It was really, really enjoyable. Next up, now we're getting to, this is still the mid-card, I would say, but it's like a part of the mid-card that had some main event implications as we would see for the next year. First up, we have Kane with China versus Triple H, right? The storyline here was Kane and China were like hanging out. Kane was actually a very sympathetic character because even though he was a heel, the entire point was Kane is like so hideously disfigured from his burns, right? This is called great storytelling, that being around China really boosted his self-esteem, right? Triple H, on the other hand, was trying to essentially woo China back, right? Bring her over to DX. So the match starts, the match ends with China betraying Kane. Triple H hits the pedigree and pins Kane. He and China hug. The fans go crazy, right? After this, we have Sable versus Tori, right? Not Tori Wilson, but Tori, the original Tori, who would later go on to play the role of X-Pac's girlfriend Tori, right? Sable beats Tori in what essentially is a squash match. There was a promo before. Tori came out in like a skin suit. It was a little goofy, but you know, it was only 5 minutes, so you can't really blame anybody, can you? Right? Next up, we have a great promo, and it's basically time for what I would consider to be the main event portion of the night, right? The promo is DX in the back, right? Standing united, back together again, right? DX is hyping up X-Pac, who's about to wrestle Shane McMahon for the European title, right? The entire point of Shane McMahon being the European champion was basically that he sucks, he's a pussy, but he's got his friends, the Mean Street Posse. Test helps him out, and of course, he's Mr. McMahon's son, so basically, he's just like a nepotistic champion, whereas X-Pac is presented as a real wrestler and a product of the streets, as JR would tell us, right? So it was, the storyline was a rich kid, right, who's really a pussy and has to gang up for his fights against X-Pac, who was basically alone, but alone no longer because DX was finally back. X-Pac comes out, and the whole match is basically just X-Pac and Shane and X-Pac trying to overcome all the odds. Test comes in, X-Pac hits him with one of those spin kicks. The Mean Street Posse grab him on the outside. X-Pac beats their ass, right? Shane McMahon keeps cheating, and at this point, Triple H and China come to even the odds. But China distracts the referee. X-Pac is a little confused, turns around, boom, pedigree, motherfucks. Triple H and China double turn. You know what I'm saying? Double turn up in this bitch, right? They pin X-Pac, and Shane remains the champion. You understand what I'm saying? Shane McMahon remains the champion. Road Dogg and Billy Gunn come out, but they're overwhelmed, so they get their asses beat too. Then what happens? I think this is what happened. I don't remember this part because I kind of like spaced out when I was watching it, but I'm pretty sure my memory is serving me correctly. Kane, I think, comes in and basically levels the playing field, right? Now, this is like a triple turn, right? So China goes from, if you will, like heel kind of with Kane to face, right? Then Triple H and China turn heel like a match and a half later. Then Kane comes and saves the underdogs now, like the losers of DX, the Outlaws and X-Pac, and this leads to Kane turning face, right? And this leads to a great partnership between Kane and X-Pac, which is an underrated tag team and an underrated storyline. They had to ruin it by the next WrestleMania because Billy Gunn got injured, so Road Dogg needed a spot on the card. They made it a tag match. It should have just been Kane versus X-Pac, with Kane winning, but they threw in Road Dogg and Rikishi. That's the next WrestleMania. We'll talk about that another time, cucks. But long story short, X-Pac has been defeated. X-Pac has been cucked, and X-Pac will be out for revenge, right? And this is fucking X-Pac we're talking about. This was, like, in my opinion, one of the best, like, moments of X-Pac's career. This run, right, that led to the King of the Ring and a bunch of other things. It was just really, really good, right? Anyways, it doesn't matter. After this, we had a Hell in a Cell match. The Undertaker versus Big Boss Man, right? This is basically, it's a pretty good match. Like, at this point, Boss Man was considered to be like a serious threat. There was beef between the Undertaker's Dark Ministry and, of course, the Corporation, right? So Big Boss Man was here to put Undertaker in his place. Basically, at this point, Vince McMahon had like two enemy forces, right? It was the Undertaker and Stone Cold. You see what I'm saying? And of course, the Undertaker's allies. But the Undertaker wasn't a hero. He was also a heel. He just didn't give a shit, right? He was basically like a demon who had like a cult, right? After that, we have the main event. Stone Cold versus The Rock, right? Stone Cold eventually wins because the Corporation is banned from ringside. After a bunch of shenanigans, Stone Cold becomes the champ and everyone goes home happy. A real main event. Now, this pay-per-view, in my opinion, had everything that mattered, right? As you can see from the way that I just told you, every match here, especially the main matches, had a purpose, right? Starting with Kane versus Triple H, that had a purpose. That told the story. The Sable versus Tori was just like a throwaway match. Shane versus X-Pac had a story, right? That's, in my opinion, that's the best match during this pay-per-view. I think it's better than the main event because it continues the general trend of the Corporation versus everybody, right? This is also continued by Undertaker versus Boss Man, right? To show that there's also the Undertaker waiting and lurking, right? This would, of course, culminate with the Undertaker and Vince McMahon joining forces and forming the Dark, what's it called, the Dark Corporation or the Corporate Ministry. I don't remember to be honest, but basically like a mix of two stables. And at that point, the Dark Ministry, the Ministry of Darkness, I should say, broke up a little bit too. So like Edge and Christian and Gangrel left, right? So they became faces. And but obviously, who cares about that? Vince McMahon gained a new ally in fucking Undertaker, right? And now the people that were like against Vince McMahon were people like Big Show, right? It was like a nice little shift, right? Big Show was like an enemy of the Corporation in many ways. Then of course we had fucking Stone Cold. He was the number one guy. And then perhaps the unsung hero of all this, X-Pac, motherfucks. X-Pac and Degeneration X, who are standing up against the Corporation because they had been screwed by the Corporation. There's a pay-per-view, I forget which one it is, which ends with X-Pac and Stone Cold having beers after X-Pac and pretty much helps Stone Cold retain against, it was like Undertaker and Triple H, I think, or something like that. It was just really, really well done. It was a good time to be a wrestling fan. In my opinion, this pay-per-view was just great, right? It was just an awesome pay-per-view. It felt like a WrestleMania. It felt like the showcase of the Immortals. It set itself apart, of course, from other WrestleManias, especially modern ones, with everything being concise, tight, and quick. In total, motherfucks, WrestleMania 15, I think, had what, like 12, 13 matches, If you don't count, let me Google it real fast up in this pace here. You know what I'm saying? If you don't count the 2 dark matches, which I don't count. I mean, they weren't dark matches, they were on heat, right? But whatever, we don't count those. We had what? Like 9 matches, right? A good amount of matches. Some short, some longer, and a good amount of segments. But the segments were short and sweet, right? You get a promo package talking about what has happened to get us here, and then maybe you get like a segment here and there, like for example, the DX reuniting for a brief moment segment, that kind of stuff. So this pay-per-view, in my opinion, fantastic, cuckolds. Fantastic. I really enjoyed it. With that being said, take care of yourselves. Go watch WrestleMania 15 and enjoy it. Well, I guess now I spoiled it for you bitch asses. But go watch it anyways because it was fun, motherfuckers.